Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, July 16th, and this is a Moscow City Regular Council meeting. Gina?
Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bless you.
Thank you, Gina. With that, I will move on to item number 1, which is the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, well, I got a motion by Catherine and a second by Gina to approve consent agenda as is. I'll start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay, we will move on to item number 2, which is staff recognition report. Gary Reeder, you have the altar, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have a couple of awards we'd like to recognize tonight. The first is an award that goes to Mia Wells, our city attorney, who is now certified, has completed the 2-year risk management certification through the Idaho Public Risk Management Association. Certification requirements for risk managers include understanding insurance policy, claims processing, recruitment of employees, personnel management, employer policies, torts, public records, civil rights, purchasing laws, law enforcement liability, planning and zoning procedures, public liability issues and exposures, public records, open meetings law, and a lot more that I could list off if you like. It's a pretty intense program. Mia had started the program when she was with Latah County, finished the last leg when she came down and started for the city of Moscow. So if you'd come up, and Mayor, if you'd present the award, and I will, my other job is photographer.
Is there an award for that?
Not yet.
Get you guys over here so we're out of the light there. Perfect. 2, 3. Okay, let's do one more. As soon as it tells me I can. Perfect. Thank you.
Mia didn't want to speak a few words, which I'm fine with that. I always ask everybody whenever they receive one of these awards or anything else, because it's a big deal for our city, for not only our staff here within our city, but our citizens as well. And Mia is one of those folks that follows forward with a lot of responsibility in her previous job as well as this job and the endeavors that she has here with the city of Moscow, which I, as the mayor, really appreciate, as does this council, Mia. So thank you for your efforts in doing those, because those things aren't easy and just don't take lightly. And so, good job, Mia. Gary?
Thank you. Next, we have 2 awards that were presented at the Idaho, or Association of Idaho Cities Conference in Boise. The first is an award that was presented by the Local Highway Technical Assistance Council, LTAC, and that award is an Innovation Idea Award, and it's given to Tyler Palmer on behalf of the Streets Department for the Inland Northwest Streets Maintenance Co-op. So I'd like to have Tyler and Les McDonald come up if you would. Mayor, if you'd like to do that as well. Okay. Catch up. 1, 2, 3. And again, we'll do one more. 2, 3. Perfect.
A little camera that could, right? I think it can.
So, unlike me, I never pass up a microphone. No, I'd really be remiss if I didn't just mention Tammy Gray through this process. We had this idea, it's been 7 years ago now, and we were looking at a lot of the challenges that we face being a small, relatively geographically isolated entity. and we really wanted to modernize our street maintenance, but mobilization was such a challenge for us because a lot of the processes that we wanted to be able to employ just weren't available because there was such an obstacle with mobilization. And so as we went through that process, we started thinking about how we could cooperate with other local entities to try and create enough economies of scale to be able to access some of these things. And through that process, we thought, well, we shouldn't just limit it to certain things. Let's get everyone together and talk about these streets-related items. And it really has saved us a lot of money. But Tammy Gray is the heart and soul of the thing. She keeps it going. She organizes the meetings. She sets up the locations. She sets up the lunches. She really is the reason that it's kept going. Tammy would have been very unhappy with me if I told her she had to be here tonight. She's not one for the limelight, but she really is the person who keeps this going. So she really is the true recipient of the award. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thank you.
Hey, Tyler, before you run off, I want to say a few words about that, because I was Association of Idaho Cities when we received this award. You were on vacation, but Catherine, myself, Brandy, and Art were there, as well as Jen Piffner and Mia. And so it's pretty cool when we get awards like this that's statewide, because these things are not handed out easily. And one of the things I really like about Tammy, she might not want to speak in public, but boy, now I'll tell you what, that lady will tell you what she thinks on a one-on-one, which I very much like. But it's pretty cool for us as a city because of the cost savings that we do. And you're talking about mobilization, and what that means, folks, is people that come from out of town or out of state to work on our cities. You know, you get a fee charged for whatever it takes to move this equipment from here to there, so on and so forth. And so when you can pony up with other municipalities to save money for the citizens, that means we can get more work done on streets than we've ever done before. And it's worked very, very successful. It's because of Les and Tyler and his team of folks that make that happen. So with that, thank you,
Mayor.
Tyler.
Our third award is a City Achievement Award that was given to the City of Moscow for work that was done on the Public Works Fair. The City of Moscow was recognized with the City Achievement Awards from AIC in the Public Works and Transportation category for its Public Works Fair project, which is a community outreach event that started in 2007 that provides interactive displays, vehicles, and equipment for people to view when participating in the City of Moscow Art Walk, helping to improve understanding of the role of public works in our lives and the importance of water conservation. This, too, was given by the Association of Idaho Cities, so I'd ask Les and Tyler to come up for that as well. Mayor?
And Nicole.
Nicole.
Oh, gee.
I didn't see you come in, Nicole. It actually is taking a long time to cycle. I'm not just. Perfect, thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much for, Idaho, for this recognition. The Public Works Fair and the evolution of it over the years is something, an event I'm very proud of. However, this wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the cooperation and the help that I get from the numerous staff members from Public Works. Everybody comes together on a day where we have an hour or two to get everything ready and serve our community, and everybody does an excellent job. They pretty much run the show. I just set meetings up. They do all the work at this point. So I really want to thank the staff of Public Works.
If I may as well, I just want to take a moment and recognize Nicole for the things that she does with this program and many others within the city. You know, she gives kudos to her coworkers, and I do as well, but Nicole is kind of the heart and soul of this thing over the years. Not so long ago, the Public Works Department always felt that if you recognized us or saw us, we were doing something wrong. Pothole, you thought about us. If your water didn't flow, you thought about us. If you couldn't get down a snowy street, you thought about us. And so if none of those things happened to you, then things were great, because you didn't think about who we were and what we did. So we've changed that philosophy a bit over the last 10 years, and Tyler's been a big part of that, and Nicole as well, so that we're trying to help people understand what Public Works does and what our people do on a daily basis to help them live their lives in a way that's fruitful and enjoyable within the community. And so the efforts that are taken by Nicole and her coworkers in the Public Works outreach now in conjunction with Art Walk have really helped us spread that message. People come down to that end of Art Walk, they learn what we do, they interact with our staff, they learn that, you know, they're average people doing the best they can to make it work for everybody every day. And so it's that type of thing that I think has helped people understand what we do, and you know, we're starting to see a little recognition for some of those efforts, which we really appreciate. So again, thank you to Nicole, Tyler, the rest of the crew, and thank you.
Well, Les, one of the things I'll say about Association of Idaho Cities is that the day after those awards, of course, we had meetings, and I had a number of different people ask me, other mayors from other cities, and say something like, how do you do it? And I say, I don't. It's the staff that does it. It's the professionals that work in this city that make it happen for us. And so we don't take this for granted, and because a lot of these things do not happen in a lot of cities in our state. So kudos, a round of applause to all of you. Thank you very much. Gary, do we have any more?
No, sir, that completes it for tonight.
Okay, we will move on to item number 3, which is mayoral appointments, which I have none at this time. And so we'll move on to item number 4, which is public comment and mayor's response period for 15 minutes. We set a time up for this. As long as it's something that is not on the agenda this evening or in front of public or planning and zoning and the Board of Adjustment, please come up, give us your name. We'll give you 3 minutes. Name, address, and tell us what your concerns may or may not be. With that, I'm going to move on to item number 5. Citizens Commission Report, Human Rights Commission. We have Chief Fry here and Ken Fonts, but I do not see Ken, Chief, so you must be soloing tonight.
How about if I see if I can go ahead.
Is there anybody else from Human Rights Commission here this evening? Chief?
I do not see anybody else.
Okay. Who? Oh, Jim. We're at Jim. Hold back, Jim. We'll let the chief.
So which of these do I got to hit here to make this all? So this year, the Human Rights Commission is probably one of the most active commissions that is out there. They're constantly doing different things. They did a social justice education forum to start off the year on racial equality and inclusive communities month event, and they did several movies after spring, Refugee Voices, and they just continued to bring movies in that would relate to social justice forums and different events throughout the community. Like I said, they're very active. They had Whose Streets. It was another movie that they brought in to just talk about the Ferguson riots and the different philosophies of why that happened and everything. Food chains, and I'm going to have to apologize on this one. I did not attend this event, but it talked about, if I remember right, it was different food inequalities throughout the United States and how all that plays into our communities and the just our social justices of that. The Police Pride, they do a march every year. The police department participates in that along with them, and they march from downtown up to East City Park. We have the Shake Award, which is an award that goes out to someone who has been very involved in human rights throughout the year. And if I recall right, this is an every other year award. This is one of the biggest events that they hold every year is the Martin Luther King Human Rights Breakfast. It's held out at the middle school, and they have guest speakers come in every year for that. That's just a picture there of the crowd that they usually draw every year. Indigenous People Day is another event that they held. Add the words Idaho. Human rights at the market. So over the last 3 or 4 years, they actually have a table at the market, and they speak to people as they come and try to get people more involved in these activities. And participation in the Northwest Coalition of Human Rights. Pesticides in the park. One of the individuals that's on the commission is working to get natural pesticides instead of the chemical. They're working with the city and trying to bring in more of a natural form of getting rid of weeds and different things. Pride Festival coming up again in August of this year. Inclusive Community Month. Poverty on the Palouse, which the mayor is a big part of, and I also sit in on those meetings, and Inclusive Community Potluck as well. Human Rights Day at the market again, which they'll be there in September. And then we started discussing some events that are impacting our communities and impacting human rights, and we're actually going to do the opioids and human rights and how that is affecting our society and affecting our communities as a whole. And then they'll have Indigenous Peoples Day activities, allied training workshops, which they handle yearly, fundraising dance for the Kenworthy. Kenworthy is where they do a lot of their movies and stuff, so they're trying to raise money and stuff for different movies coming in. We'll also have the Martin Luther King Human Rights Breakfast again in 2019. Finding the Center this year in September. This is a one-day event, usually either at WSU or U of I, where they bring in guest speakers to talk about human rights events. There's a law enforcement section there, as well as other areas that are handling issues with human rights. So it'll be an all-day event there. And that, if I remember right, this one's going to be over at WSU this year. And that's all that Ken had prepared. I apologize for Ken not being here. But that's just some of, like I said, they're a very active commission. They continue to look at new human rights activities and things that they can do to help make our community a better place for all.
Thank you, Chief. Questions for the chief from anybody up here?
Say that the commission meets tomorrow at 4 o'clock if anybody's interested in attending in the mayor's council, mayor's room downstairs, conference room.
Is that a full commission as well?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is.
Yes, it is.
Oh, good.
Other questions for the chief? Well, thank you, Chief, for that report. Okay, we will move on to item number 6, which is public hearing, proposed rezone of 109 North Almond Street. We got Mike Ray here presenting. Good evening, Mike.
Evening, Your Honor. Evening, Your Honor, council members. So before you tonight, we have a proposed rezone request at 109 North Almond Street. The proposal is a little over 13,000 square foot parcel, originally part of the Dumas Seed property. There was a division approved earlier this year on June 18th by the council to divide that off of the main parcel for Dumas Seed. Address is 109 North Almond Street, and the applicant's proposing to rezone the property from the R4 designation, which is multiple family residential, to the neighborhood business zone. So taking a look at the center of your screen, outlined in red is the property, a little over 13,000 square feet in size, that was divided off in June from the main Dumas property. You can see this is a relatively older photo. It's showing the current deconstruction of the former Dumas seed warehouses there. And there is an existing building on this property. It used to be the old powerhouse building. It's brick, and that's been retained for the time being. So just looking at the area, it's primarily surrounded by residential properties to the north, to the west, to the south. We do have Grops Heating and Air Conditioning to the east, St. John Hardware to the northeast, Almond Street to the east, running north-south, Asbury Street to the west, and then the property has frontage on A Street to the north, which runs in the east-westerly direction. Taking a look at what the comp plan designation defines this property as urban mixed, as well as the majority of the properties to the west, to the south, and to the east. Neighborhood conservation designation is across A Street to the north, where there's primarily residential development there. Taking a look at what the urban mix designation states within the comp plan, it's intended to provide for infill development, adaptive reuse of areas primarily surrounding downtown, between the university as well. So there should be a rich mix of residential and limited commercial, promoted through the development of small urban apartments, townhouses, and 2-3-story vertically mixed-use buildings. It also should provide pedestrian connection between downtown and the U of I, provide space for a variety of housing alternatives, niche retail, restaurants, artist studios, and personal and professional services. And then it goes on to say that off-street parking should be required, but the numbers should be reduced just because the higher likelihood of walking and bicycling within the area. So taking a look at the current zoning configuration, it's currently designated as multiple family residential, which is our R4 zone. You do have a relatively larger swath of industrial zone across the street to the east and to the northeast with St. John Hardware. R3, which is medium density residential, so duplexes, twin homes, townhouses, is in the northwest there at Asbury and A Street. So the proposal is to rezone this property from R4 to the neighborhood business zone. So the neighborhood business is lowest intensity commercial zone within the city. It's intended to apply to areas of less than 2 acres in size, where commercial services may be provided in convenient locations, intended to really serve the adjacent neighborhood instead of the entire community. The commercial services are permitted are those where traffic generation, access requirements, impacts of lighting, neighborhood need for services, and noise production will be compatible with the surrounding residential area. And then it points us to appropriate locations where the neighborhood business zone is to be applied. So where local commercial facilities will serve the everyday needs of the limited neighborhood area, where those activity levels with small-scale office development can be accommodated or tolerated by the surrounding uses, where a neighborhood core is identified, and where such commercial development will result in minimal interference with residential uses. And then an example of uses permitted within the neighborhood business zone include a wide variety of residential uses, retail sales, personal services, restaurants, professional offices, daycares, churches, and community and neighborhood centers. Taking a look at the utilities and streets within the area, so there's existing mains within A Street that have adequate water sewer capacity for any use that neighborhood business would allow. Looking at A Street, that portion is currently designated as a collector. It's 36 feet wide adjacent to this property. There is deficient infrastructure as far as curbing, gutter. There is intermittent sidewalks in the area, especially on the south side of the street. And on the north side, sidewalks intermittent as well with some curbing and some tree lawns. And then Almond is in rather poor shape as well. That's a local neighborhood street, 30-foot wide paved roadway, and you see some deterioration happening in the roadway, including the sidewalks and the curbing. So just wanted to remind you of the rezone criteria. The first one is that it's consistency with the comp plan. The second one is providing for logical and orderly location of land uses and community services. The next one is the uses expected to occur will be compatible with the surrounding area. The fourth is that the development expected to occur as a result of the rezone will not place an undue burden upon delivery of services provided by any political subdivision within the planning jurisdiction. And then the fourth, looking at the development expected to occur as a result of the rezone can be adequately served by the existing transportation network, public facilities, and services. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting, and all those materials are attached to your packet tonight. Property owners within 600 feet, and that occurred on May 23rd of this year. The commission did conduct a public hearing, and that happened at the end of June on the 27th, and they recommended approval with no conditions. Staff's recommendation is that after conducting a public hearing, consideration of testimony received, approve the proposed zoning ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary, and then adopt the Planning and Zoning Commission's reasoned statement of relevant criteria and standards. And I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Michael? Before I open the public hearing. Okay, Brandy?
How is it determined when the criterion that it serves the surrounding neighborhood and not the community as a whole is met? Who decides that?
Well, a lot of it comes down to the comprehensive plan, but Planning and Zoning Commission and then City Council ultimately decide. They review the relevant criteria and standards that are required to approve a rezone, but it would mainly be a determination by City Council in the end whether or not.
But I mean, if it is determined to be rezoned, then when particular uses on that property are established, how is it assured that they fit those criterion that you mentioned up there? You know, that it's serving the local neighborhood rather than the city as a whole, for example. I know, I feel like I just asked the same question again. I'm sorry.
Well, really the comp plan points you to those specific areas where neighborhood business would be appropriate. And so those are usually the areas that are consistent. Usually all the uses within the neighborhood business zone are already predetermined to be consistent and compatible with the surrounding residential area. And so any use that would be allowed underneath that zone would already be compatible if it should go in there. And then, it restricts it typically to a maximum size of 2 acres. This parcel's a little over 13,000 square feet in size, which is about 1/4 of an acre. And so, it's relatively small. The impact to the adjacent neighborhood, you do have commercial services to the east, but to the north, west, and the south, you'll have residential neighborhood that this property will be able to serve. And, it's really just intended to serve that kind of surrounding area.
Jim?
Mike, is the remaining R4 property adjacent to that, is that slated for development in the near future? Has anyone proposed?
It's anticipated. The property's been purchased, and we are currently working with the owner of the property on conceptual site plans for future development.
That would be R4 type housing, is that?
It would be a use consistent with the R4 zone, correct.
Thank you.
Catherine?
Since parking always ends up coming up, and a couple slides back, you talked about the intermittent sidewalk and all that kind of stuff that's near the property. Would that be a consideration to require more parking on a parcel that's being rezoned because of the area around it not being up to standard?
Well, as part of the redevelopment of this property, those public improvements will be required. And so that will mitigate any issue with deficient infrastructure in the area. Usually when a rezone request is heard, you can enter into a development agreement to reduce the number of uses, but not necessarily require additional parking.
That's just the one that everybody ends up talking about so much is parking, and so in terms of this one, I was just curious.
Well, I mean, especially because you have a comp plan designation in this area that says parking should be reduced. Mm-hmm. And we currently, there is no mechanism we have in place right here to reduce the parking right now. So parking would need to be provided at 100%, whereas other areas like south of 6th Street and Legacy Crossing, we do have like a parking reduction where it's typically 50% of the required parking. In this case, it would be, still be 100% of what our code requires right now, even though the comp plan says that it should be reduced just because of the amounts of pedestrian and bicycle activity in the area.
Thank you.
Other questions from Mike? Okay.
One other, so there's in the zoning codes, it talks about parking facilities for uses permitted within the neighborhood business zoning district. So could it be a parking lot? And that's all it is? Would that be permitted in this zone?
It would have to be for a use permitted in the neighborhood business zone, but.
Which would only be on that parcel? Because right now, there's no other neighborhood business around it. It's not connected to any other neighborhood business. So I'm just asking, without a business that would have the associated parking, it couldn't just be converted to a parking lot? Or could it?
I would have to check our use table to give you a correct answer on that.
Bill, is that a question you could answer?
Not just yet, because that has not been updated on the city code, so I was just trying to look that up.
Okay.
That latest ordinance has not been updated just yet. But we can certainly take a look at it and report to you after you receive public testimony.
Okay, fair enough. Sound good to you, Brandon? Other questions?
Can we see that list of uses again, Mike? Can you pull that slide up for us? Perfect, thank you. I had the same question that Brandy had because it just seems like a sort of an impossible standard to enforce, saying whether or not it's for the specific neighborhood that it's close by. I could see lots of things that fall into one of those categories being more of a citywide kind of a business. It's just an interesting criteria.
Well, there's really there's nothing that's enforced. It's just in the application of the zone is intended to serve that surrounding area. It doesn't necessarily, that the use does not, or the applicant that proposes the use doesn't have to justify that it's intended to serve that area. It's already assumed that any use that's allowed in that zone would serve that area.
Okay.
If I may, if it might be helpful.
Okay, Bill.
So those intent statements are generally intended to be guiding directions to the council as you consider the appropriate application of a zoning district, but they do have no force and effect of law about what can occur on the property. So the allowable uses that are listed, regardless of who may be frequenting the business or establishment there are no controls. It's really not necessarily a criteria. Really the criteria you have to evaluate are those 5 criteria that Mike had on the screen previously. Those intent statements are just intended to give the council some general guidance about where those zones are appropriately located. In this instance, this was the lowest intensity commercial zoning district that was essentially available in the city code to allow for the potential reuse of that existing brick building for commercial use. And so it does have that general guidance about the intent of the neighborhood business districts is not to create a community-centric commercial area out in a residential neighborhood where oftentimes neighborhood business is located. It's intended that it generally supports the residential neighborhood around it, but it does not preclude anybody else from frequenting a business that may be passing by the area or find that there is an establishment, a restaurant, or a daycare facility that they like in that location. So it's just some general guidance on the council under the intent statement of the code to give you some information about where the zones are appropriately located, but when it comes to the allowable uses or who can frequent the business, there are no restrictions in the code.
Other questions before I open the public hearing? Thank you, Michael. I will open the public hearing now at 7:34, and we will hear from the applicant, please.
Good evening. Garrett Thompson on behalf of Thompson Development, LLC, 1010 Pinecrest Road, Moscow, Idaho. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Thank you for your time and consideration tonight. Thank you for city staff. for your work on this presentation. Thank you, Mike. I believe it's a pretty straightforward application. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and seems like a natural fit in this location in town. This property is owned by Bloom Enterprises LLC, and Thompson Development is under contract to purchase the property from Bloom Enterprises. Mr. Noel Bloom could not attend the meeting tonight, but he is, of course, supportive of the rezone and has attended both the neighborhood meeting and the planning and zoning meeting and shared a bit of what his future plans are for the parent parcel. I respectfully ask that you approve this rezone request. Thank you. I will try to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, Garrett, I tell you what, why don't we hear other testimony? If somebody wants to call you up, we'll call you up. Thank you. Now I will take general testimony in favor. Please state your name and address, even though we know who you are, Victoria.
Victoria Seaver, 121 North Lily, Moscow, 2 blocks from my door to their door. Okay, rezoning this site to neighborhood business is a poster child for urban mixed and reuse of property that is also a reclaimed brownfield that the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency participated in. While it is at the east edge of the neighborhood and close to North Main, there is substantial neighborhood to the northwest and south for it to serve. Incidentally, serving the neighborhood does not mean you can't have people from downtown use it, and if it helps the neighborhood be improved in any way, shape, manner, or form, it serves the neighborhood, and it would. Directly across from the street from this corner are 3 businesses now, and for a long time, the whole block was the granary, including a railroad, so it can handle a small business there. By chance, I watched 3 segments on PBS yesterday on cities and streets that changed America. One traced the transition to high-rises and the loss of small businesses in neighborhoods, which turns out to not be so great after all. The trend now is toward urban mixed. It may not be a ma and pop shop anymore, but someone's doing business or offering professional services. A small business on this corner puts its parking on site and shouldn't spill onto the streets. The high-density residential that the rest of the block is likely to become may. So neighborhood business helps us out since its traffic and parking isn't 24/7 and is more contained. Anyone I've heard from wants to save the historic brick building. That'll take extra cost and effort and most likely won't happen as residential. As a business, it has the opportunity to become something special as a preserved landmark. Regarding crime, which was brought up at the neighborhood meeting, we are not in a high crime area. Because we're in high density, we may have, our odds may be a little bit greater for minor crime, increasing a little, but we're not a high crime area. What we do get is pedestrian. That's pedestrian bar traffic funneling home at night along A Street and through some areas to get to all the apartments at the west end. So we get minor vandalism and scuffles and noise and things like that. So a bar wouldn't be a good thing, but a bar's not allowed here. Myself, I loved the trains. Went to the door every time they came through, had to see them. And I didn't mind the granary, but they're gone. So here's an opportunity for the next phase of neighborhood development on the old Dumas site. This rezone and preserving the brick powerhouse should be a good thing. I've been there a long time. If you got questions, you can ask me.
Thank you, Victoria. Other testimony in favor of the application? Okay, I'll take opposition to the application as well as general testimony. Seeing none rush, I will close the public hearing at 7:40. Turn it over to council for deliberation.
I wanted wanted to ask Garrett another question.
Garrett, would you please come up here to the podium, please?
I can tell how much you like being at the podium. Well, it's okay. In the last paragraph that you read, you were describing this parcel was the beginning of what was the parent?
Parent parcel.
Parent.
It's the whole parcel that Noel Blooms purchased, and then I am asking for a rezone to break off 13,000 acres, or acres, ooh, wow. Whoa, if I had 13,000 acres.
This is a parent, right here is what he's talking about.
Oh, okay.
13,000 square feet.
That's what Garrett's after right
Okay.
there.
Yes.
This is a parent that
So,
you're referring to.
yeah, and all I can say is there are some stakes out there, so if you drive by, you can see the stakes with the red tops on it that kind of would show the rectangle of where.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor,
Bill?
I just wanted to respond to the question earlier. Parking is a permitted principal use in the neighborhood business district.
Okay, meaning it could be, if it was rezoned, it could be turned into a parking lot.
Correct.
Art?
Well, I think it's a very good fit for the area, both in terms of the comp plan and the other relevant criteria that we're supposed to examine a rezone for. I think it fits in. I think it serves, or will serve, the neighborhood well, and is a good use for that particular parcel, and is well located for this kind of endeavor.
Jim?
I want to kind of piggyback on Brandy's thing. In the R4 designation, you could pave the whole thing as a parking lot as well, couldn't you? Yeah. There's nothing that stops you from making the entire parcel a parking lot, is there? Just because it's in the R4 district doesn't preclude it from being a parking lot. Like if you built apartments, you could have a big parking lot for them, right?
Correct. In the R4, it's just a permitted accessory use. It has to be accessory to a principal use on the property. So if you had, you could build one apartment building and you could make the entire rest of the property a parking lot if you wish to. It's just in the neighborhood business district, that is allowed as a principal use, so it does not have to be accessory to anything on that property. That's the difference.
Okay.
I appreciate what Victoria had to say. It's nice hearing from people that are close by, and especially since you've been in the neighborhood long enough to see it through different iterations. So thank you for that.
Gina? I agree with Councilor Bedke. I think it's an excellent use of that somewhat unattractive spot right now. And I picture, when we're talking about pedestrian and bicycle traffic, I picture a Saturday morning after the market walking over there to avail myself of something in that area. I'm hoping it's got to do with the powerhouse, Garrett. I also appreciate Victoria's feedback and thoughts as well. It is nice to hear that the neighbors don't think it's just going to be awful. So if you're ready, I would...
Can I say?
Certainly.
So I agree with a lot of what has all been said too, and I think it makes sense for this transition piece. The only hesitation I have, and I'm curious, Victoria, if I'm hoping that's not what would come of it, but it could be converted to a parking lot as a neighbor. So that's what I would assume how you would feel. So that's my only hesitation. I don't know if there would be any way to guard against that. Could that be a condition of approval? I don't know.
I don't know if you could make that a condition, could you, Bill? What I would suggest is if you're not in favor, vote against it. Bill, would you answer that?
Well, I think as Mike reported early on, the council does have the authority under state statute to limit uses upon a rezone by entering into a development agreement. I think the council would need to try to articulate the reasons why they're essentially modifying that zoning district specifically for this this individual property, that no other, let's say, neighborhood business district would have that condition. And largely you'd be having to mitigate against some sort of adverse impact. And so we just want to have the council identify what that adverse impact is. If that is a permitted use in the neighborhood business district and is permitted in all neighborhood business districts, if you're going to restrict that in this location, I think we need to articulate what is the condition that warrants the council imposing that condition that, if it was that parking could not be a principal use, but it would have to be an accessory use.
Given that the R4 could get one apartment building shoved into its southwest corner and the rest of it turn into a giant parking lot, I don't think that that would reflect the highest and best use of the parcel in question, which would undoubtedly be used for a neighborhood business. And therefore, I don't think that we should give too much consideration to the fact that it theoretically could become a parking lot, but clearly won't, and stall us from making any decisions that would enhance the redevelopment and reuse of this already blighted area.
Jim?
It seems to me that the structure that remains there was left there for a particular reason, and maybe it's top secret what that is right now, but it's obvious that was left there because there's a planned development for it, and it would have been raised if a parking lot was the intent, because there's value in the structure, in the materials in the structure, so I think that's what would have happened. So
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It doesn't sound very likely that that's what is planned to occur, and I think we're all, thinking it's going to be something great, and that's why I would support the rezone. But it sounds like if we have an option to assure, I don't think that has to hold things up. Why would that have to hold things up? If we feel that we want to protect that it wouldn't be converted to a parking lot with that as its only use, is there some reason why we wouldn't do that?
I think it sets a bad precedent for every other neighborhood business we'd be looking at putting into town. And I would hate to have to sit down and re-articulate reasons, yay or nay, against particular conditions on any parcel. And so I think that it would be setting us up for future failure and giving the impression that Moscow is returning to a status of a non-friendly place to try to reuse land that is otherwise blighted.
That is my concern as well. I'm not ready to get into that restrictive mode of operation.
Yeah, I understand that. Is there anything about this location being surrounded by so much density of neighborhood that would make you feel it was appropriate in this case as opposed to others?
I'd be more worried about the industrial use at St. John Hardware. Kitty corner.
I guess, and if I might, in your look at the area, you see the residential office area to the east. Parking lots are permitted principal use in that zoning district as well. And so I guess we'd have to understand why.
Oh, so where do you mean, Bill?
In the residential office, the RO zoning
okay.
district, parking lots are permitted principal use in that zoning district as well.
Brandy, I've got a question to ask you.
Yeah.
I'm getting that you're opposed if this is a parking lot. Are you talking about a paid parking lot?
Yes,
for
I mean, I'm
monies?
just thinking to lose it to an entirely paved lot, that whole part. It's not sounding like that's likely going to happen,
Well,
but
let's just say if it does, let's say if it does happen, I don't necessarily see what a bad thing that would be. Where everybody's always complaining about parking, what issue would that, what
Well, I'm
negativity
just,
would that have?
in thinking about some of the comments from the citizens that did respond, there were the issues about safety and transitions that would not be resolved if it were a parking lot. It would be resolved if there was some commercial development there, but it potentially could be.
Well, it's conversations that may or may not happen, that's speculation. We have no clue whether that would or would not happen.
Can I ask
Catherine?
you- So Mike, at the planning and zoning meeting, was there any conversation about, did the parking come up as a query in terms of why, like Bill said, this could also be residential office, same kind of use for parking as this one? Did they have any kind of conversation about that? Was there any concern on their part?
There was just a couple of residents that showed up to give public testimony about parking in the area being an issue, and there was discussion on the commission. One of the commissioners asked what the parking requirements were, and I reiterated that it'd be pretty much what the code requires right now, and there's no, 50% or no reduction that we have in this area, even though it's in the urban renewal district.
Gina?
I don't think we should get into the position of speculating here and worrying about what could happen. I think that it is too restrictive and does not reflect our willingness and our support of this project at all. So I am going to make a motion that we approve the proposed zoning ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Are you going to tack on and adopt a planning and
Isn't that a
zoning
separate
commission?
Thought we had to
or
do
is
it
that separate?
separately.
Well, we can do it both at the same time or separate.
Statement of criteria.
I can tack on the adopt the Planning and Zoning Commission reasoned statement of relevant criteria as well with my motion.
Second that as well.
Okay, we have a motion by Gina and a second by Art to approve the proposed zoning ordinance under the suspensions of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings and that be read by title and published by summary, and to adopt the Planning and Zoning Commission's reasoned statement of relevant criteria. Further conversation. I'll start the roll with you, Brandy.
Well, I think everyone, I'm just concerned about the parking lot. I know I'm having a little more conversation, but since I'm starting. But in looking over the public comment, I recognize that the neighbors are overwhelmingly in support of it and are enthusiastic for something good to happen there. So I hope that that's what happens, and I will vote aye for the rezone.
Aye.
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 Okay. And so that passes. And there is
For
an
tolerating my soliloquy.
This will be ordinance number 2018 dash something. Okay, well, we've got ordinance number 2018 dash question mark. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho Municipal Corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the zoning and approximately 21,193 square feet of property described in Section 1 of this ordinance as neighborhood business, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from and after its passage, approval, and publication according to law. Okay, that was ordinance number 201808. Thank you. With that, we will move on to item number 7 of the agenda, which is the bid award for the 5339 grant shelters. Les McDonald, you are up, sir.
Well, good evening again. Playing with all the cords floating under my feet down here, so that's out of the way. Our 5339 grant project is something that's been around a while. It has a number of features attached to it. This is a grant that helped us to acquire a van pool, transit van, a couple years ago. It will also help us with on-street markings for bicycle systems and wayfinding signage for bicycles. And the other 2 areas which are included in this bid award this evening are the installation of bus shelters and benches and a covered bike parking facility just outside of City Hall. So we'll talk about those last 2 items and how they fit within the grant and the bid award before you this evening. The first portion has to do with the installation of bus shelters. We did acquire actually 5 or 6 shelters a few years ago through various funding means, including Smart Transit. One of those was installed at Walmart stop on Warbonnet already, but the other 5 are remaining, and they are in these locations kind of scattered around the city. So zooming in a little bit, each of these numbered locations, with the exception of number 1 and number 6, as I recall, will be where there are shelters, bus shelters installed at existing bus stops. So this contract that is before you this evening will do the installation of any concrete slabs, foundations, actually assemble and install the shelters that we have already in storage. The other locations have to do with the covered bike parking facility, which is here at City Hall, and the bench, I believe, at Hayes and 3rd Street. This is a picture of a pretty typical standard bus shelter that we have in our system. A couple different manufacturers that make these now. This one, I think, is a different manufacturer than some of them we have out on the street today, but it's representative of the style that we've been using for bus shelters, and they vary in size, and within the bid, I believe there are 3 different size shelters, 5 by 10 and 5 by 14 for the bus shelters, and then the final one is the larger 12 by 18 bike shelter. The bike shelter itself would, as I said, be located outside of City Hall here on the southeast corner. So this is a kind of a graphic representation of where it would be placed using our typical shelter look, if you will. Another view from the southwest corner of the property looking towards the east in the parking lot. So again, a covered bike facility here that would front on the sidewalk on the north side of 3rd Street and adjacent to that little sidewalk that runs out to the parking lot at the rear of the building. Along with the shelter installation itself, we would be installing a double-tier bike storage rack, something like this. There's some different versions out there, but essentially what they do is provide spaces at the ground level, the concrete slab level, for bikes to roll in, and then a second tier of storage that's elevated and has the ability to be dropped down so that you can place your bike into it and then lift it up to this level and it locks in place. The system what we'll be installing in the shelter has a capacity of 12 units, 12 bikes. It can be expanded in the future if there is a demand to do so. Also within the shelter, starting out inside, but could be moved to the outside in the future if we need to expand the actual bike parking component, is one of the repair stations. These are kind of popping up all over. They're very popular on bike trails, very useful if you're out biking in the community and you have issues with your equipment. Essentially, they are a freestanding unit. You can actually hang the bike on a lever here, and then there are tools attached to it on cables like you see here. There's a screwdriver and other things that are all on these cables hanging, so you can use those to make repairs on your bicycle, but they stick around. They don't wander off with the bikes. There's also a air pump in there. There's a lever right there. It's a foot pump, so you can add pressure to the tires as needed. So they're very handy. There's a couple of them around town right now, but we want to see more of them added into the system, so we felt this would be a good location. So that is kind of the quick overview of the project. We put it out for bids in July, in late June, and the opening was in early July. We did receive bids from 3 firms. The lowest price came from McCall's Classic Construction at a price of $98,624.82. So this evening we are asking for the council to accept that bid and award the contract in that amount, along with authorizing staff or providing staff authorization for change orders not to exceed 10% of the contract amount.
Questions for
Answer
Art?
questions.
I saw in the packet that the amount was $141,000 total, almost $15,000 from the federals plus $26,000 in local. The bid came in at 98 some. Can we utilize the rest of that grant money rather than just letting it fade away? Do we have other projects? Oh, we've already done that much?
We have. The equipment has been purchased using these same grant funds, so we have the shelter already on order, the bike repair station, there's garbage cans, there's a bench, things of that nature. Those have all been pre-ordered in advance of this contract so that this contract can actually do the installation. So we will be essentially using all of that grant funding that is available.
Right on.
Other questions for Les?
I move to accept the low bid from McCall's Classic Construction, award the contract in the amount of $98,624.82, and authorize staff approval for construction change orders in an amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount.
I'll second.
Jim beat you, Art.
Yep, he did.
Okay, I've got a motion by Catherine and a second by Jim to accept the low bid from McCall's Classic Construction, award the contract in the amount of $98,624.82, and authorize staff approval for construction change order in amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount. I'll start to roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Yay.
Okay, thank you, Les. We will move on to item number 8, which is Les's as well, 3rd and Adams Street raised crosswalk.
Very good. Well, as you know, we've been working on the 3rd Street corridor for some time, obviously of interest to a lot of folks, and including a lot of folks that are in the room this evening. As part of that, we are continuing efforts to put the bids or the contracts out onto the street for bids for the corridor improvements. And in recognition of the time of year that these are going out and the potential conflict that could occur in one specific location, we decided to extract that one location, which happens to be the intersection of Adams and 3rd Street, from the remainder of the work from there on to Mountain View. We are doing that in recognition of the fact that if we don't get that particular piece underway ahead of the rest of it, it's likely it would not be done before the high school went back into session. So we wanted to make sure that we got that out in advance of the others and more quickly. So that's what is before you this evening, is a contract award for construction of the improvements for the corridor at the location of Adams and 3rd Street intersection. If you'll recall, and this is from our original work that we did in-house at staff level, the Plan C concept, which included the two-way separated bike system, includes a raised pedestrian crossing on the east side of the Adams intersection. This is the driveway that comes out of the bus loop in front of the high school. A very busy location, lots and lots of pedestrians every day during the school year, all times during the school day. So that was the idea, was to do a raised pedestrian crossing. The folks that we hired at Alta, when they did their assessment of the corridor, they agreed that yes, that was a good idea to do a raised crossing there. It recommended that we make a few modifications. One of them was due to the fact that the parking that was going to be on the north side of the road was shifted to the south side of 3rd Street, and therefore a curb bulb that places a barrier, if you will, at the end of the parking became an obvious addition that they recommended. It also shortens the length of the crosswalk here and just generally helps visibility for pedestrians out here to bring them out closer to the travel lane that's traversing west to east. The other thing that they suggested was that we modify our existing curb line in front of the transit stop and the bus shelter that's currently here, so that the buses would not pull to the existing curb and then have to merge back into traffic, but they would actually stay out in the travel lane, pause for that short time while they're picking up or unloading passengers, and then continue on. So this is part of what Alta recommended, part of what the City Council adopted and directed staff to proceed with. So here is the actual set of construction drawings that show a slightly varied version of that. Again, we have the raised pedestrian crossing here, ramp up and ramp down as you're heading westbound. You'll note that the ramp up is a little shorter horizontally than the ramp down. That's because the street is dropping in grade from east to west, and so it just takes less distance horizontally for the street and the ramp to meet on the east side as compared to chasing the grade a little bit further on the west. It's 8% slope in either case. This is the curb extension at the end of the parking, but instead of actually bringing it back to the existing curb line, our designers felt it was probably a better move to carry it further and just tie it right into the extension for the transit stop. So that's why it looks like that rather than that dip right there. It actually just runs all the way through. So in essence, it extends the driveway approach for the buses that are exiting out of the high school. You can see the other ramp there on the west side of the intersection will be rebuilt. And again, the crosswalk shortened. The bus shelter will be turned around 180 degrees, so instead of facing the sidewalk here, it'll actually face out to where the bus will be when it comes up, and then the concrete pads placed for access from the sidewalk to the bus and the front of the bus shelter. And then the rest of the concrete here is really just to make sure the transitions work with the existing sidewalks and driveways that are around the edge of the job. So that is the extent of the work. We did put the project out to bid in the form of an informal quotations. This is under $50,000 was the estimate, so it didn't have to go out through the normal advertised broadcast approach. We could solicit quotes from contractors. McCall's Classic Construction gave us a price that was the best. And so that is what is before you here this evening, is to award the contract to McCall's Classic Construction in the amount of $49,995.75. And again, authorize staff for approval of construction change orders not to exceed 10% of the contract amount.
I just have a question about so when you leave from the high school, the sidewalk is, I can't see if that's like 5.5 feet, and then it breaks into 10 feet across, and then once you get to the other side, then it's 9
Other
feet?
way around.
This is 10 feet wide, if that's what you're talking
Yeah.
about, this
The
route.
whole- even
10
after
feet.
the blue?
We dropped this, where is that? It's a little bit hard to make out.
It looks like 9.
I believe it's 9 on the north side, and I believe it is still 10 on the south side, but it is tapering a little bit. But this is also concrete in here. So this is really a large concrete area for pedestrians to maneuver through here, and then the ramp itself is in that, I believe, about 9 feet wide.
So are you doing work then on the south side as well?
Everything in blue
Is what you're doing, okay.
would be included in this work.
Okay. Thank you.
So you don't need to.
I'm sorry.
Other questions for Les?
Well, in that case, I would move to accept the bid from McCall's Classic Construction Award and award the contract in the amount of $49,995.75 and authorize staff approval for construction change orders in the amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount.
Second.
Okay, got a motion by Art and a second by Jeannie to accept the bid from McCall's Classic Construction and award the contract in the amount of $49,995.75 and authorize staff approval for construction change orders in the amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount. Start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
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 I'm really glad you pulled it out to get done before the school year starts. Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you, Les.
You're welcome.
Now we're going to go on to item number 9, Third Street Bridge bid opening. Les McDonald, you have the podium again, sir.
Thank you, sir. Well, at the other end of the corridor, of course, the bridge location where 3rd Street crosses over Paradise Creek. It has been the intent and direction of the council that we proceed with the construction of a multimodal bridge across the creek that would address pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular traffic. So we have been progressing along that path, and with the assistance of our consultants, Keller Associates out of Boise, a design was developed that fit a very constricted location. The project was put out to bid, and we have completed the bid opening process. So it was about Tuesday of last week when we opened bids. We had 2 responsive bidders. The engineer's estimate just prior to advertising the project for the construction of the bid, including the approach work on either side, was $598,906. The low bid that we received from Clearwater Construction out of Spokane was $920,957.10. So obviously well above what was anticipated, certainly above what the engineers were estimating in their last estimate they provided to us, and above what we'd anticipated on the overall budget. So the course of action before us, I have a couple of recommendations for you. For this evening, in terms of the bids, my recommendation is that we reject these bids, both of them, at this point. After that, my recommendation is that staff will look further into the bids themselves, have some conversations with the contractors who provided the bids, work with our consulting engineer to get a better assessment of why the pricing is as high as it is. And then from that, make some determinations as to how we might modify the project, either in its configuration or design, or in the manner in which it is advertised and pursued. And I say that meaning that this time of year is not a great time of year to advertise projects. Everybody has a busy summer. There's lots of contractors out there that are doing their thing and have a full plate. If we advertise the project in the late fall or in the winter months, typically we see better pricing than we do on projects that are advertised either late in the spring or into the summer months. So my suggestion would be, assuming we reject bids this evening, that we pursue a staff review of the components of the bid, the pricing, identify potential changes that could be made, and then re-advertise the project late this year or in the early portion of 2019 for construction in 2019.
Les, it appears to me after reading through this that Keller and Associates, the design engineer for this project, was either way off, or these two groups were hosing the city of Moscow. That's how I see it. I mean, how in the world can anybody with engineering expertise be so far off from what we thought it would be? Because your office, I mean, you thought this was a regional bid by Keller and Associates?
Well, we had expressed some concerns. There have been some indications out there that others have experienced similar numbers this year and in our region. And so that was something we did speak with Keller about, and they did revise their estimates. They came up, frankly. But it may be that they were not truly recognizing perhaps what the local climate was for bidding. We have a fairly small market here. And so as the workloads of firms become heavy, bid prices tend to rise. So, it's a little difficult to say at this stage. Like I say, we need to dive further into the detail of the bids and talk further with the consultants and the contractors about what they're seeing.
Art, did you have something? You had your hand up?
No, I was just twitching.
Oh, okay, well, there's a lot of thoughts going through, I think, everybody's head up here about, anyway, we'll go on to Catherine.
My question has to do with mobilization, which actually speaks to what Tyler, the whole reason you all were getting the award, because you're working with communities. And when you look at the two bids, the mobilization that was recommended, that Keller thought, was going to be $40,000, and then the mobilization is from Clearwater is $65,000, and from NNAC is $122,000. Do you know if those organizations, are they just not in this area at this point and they have to come from so far?
Well, Clearwater is, I believe, of Spokane, and NNAC is from the Coeur d'Alene area. Oh. So they're, roughly similar distance. Yeah. Part of the concern, I believe, probably has to do with, if they had a winter shutdown, would they have to mobilize a couple of times? That obviously adds cost. But we didn't see that necessarily reflected in the spring schedule either. Mm-hmm. So there are some questions there.
Jim.
Mr. Mayor, I think that the first thing we need to do is make a motion to reject all the bids that we've received so far as a separate item.
Okay, Jim made the motion.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Jim and a second by Catherine to reject all bids and provide further staff direction.
Don't say anything about further staff direction.
Just
I
the
just
two
said
bids,
reject
right?
the bids.
Okay.
Okay.
And we got a second, so we'll go from there. I'll start with Ann.
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Okay, now, Jim, you can talk about the further direction.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say I'm still in support of the multimodal project, and all the work that's been done has been great. And the Third Street improvements that are coming as a result of that, I think are awesome. But I think the likelihood that we're going to get a lower bid in the next year is pretty low. So what I would like to do now is make a motion that the council direct staff to find and install a temporary portable bike pedestrian bridge for Third Street to connect those improvements to Mountain View Road with the following parameters. Number one, that the purchase of the structure be complete by the end of fiscal year 2018. Number two, that the cost of the structure be under $50,000 in order to avoid the bidding process. And number three, that the bridge be open to the public by the end of the calendar year. And let's go ahead and see if there's a second to that.
I'll second that.
And we can have discussion on it.
Okay, well, we got a motion by Jim and a second by Brandy about a portable temporary bridge.
Temporary portable
And I think that
bike
might have to be.
pedestrian bridge.
That might have to be defined a little bit more.
Yeah, I was wondering how temporary would be, and then if we've got a bridge on our hands that is temporary, what happens to the bridge when it is replaced by something permanent?
Okay, so if it is a temporary bridge, as I was thinking, is that when we do get funding from a grant or some other way to get the multimodal project finished, that this bridge could be used for the Hello Walk project through the URA. So it'd be a bridge that we could pick it up with a crane and move it to another location that we already need a bridge for, and we would save that cost.
I have a question.
Okay,
'Cause
Catherine.
all the, so is the 50,000, what you're thinking is just the bridge cost, or is it also the engineering and all the?
That's just a bridge, and that would be inclusive. And I'm not bringing this up without having done my homework.
I know, that's why I'm gonna ask you, I figured you might.
I have contacted several custom bridge companies that can build a bridge for that cost and deliver it here and do so before the end of the year. And I'll share those with the Public Works Department. Two companies can build a custom brand-new bridge, Bailey Bridges and ET Tectonics. And I've identified a bunch of railroad flat cars that could be used as a bike pedestrian bridge that we would just have to put railings on. And those could be shipped immediately, so they could be in place anytime. And so it would be just a question of Public Works selecting the best option, what they feel is the best option and the easiest one. Bailey Bridges, for instance, could have a steel structure that has a 12-foot deck and 54-inch railings, and they could bring it on a truck and set it in place in one day.
Where are they at, Jim? Where are they located at?
They're in Pennsylvania. Tectonics, I think, is in California, and the flat car, the best flat car thing I found was in California.
Okay.
So, and the freight's included in the Bailey Bridge, and they could do it for between 40 to 50K, depending on what amenities we wanted. So it could be done in that time frame. They would take them 4 weeks to get the design specs through their system, and then their production schedule would say mid-November for delivery. So I only bring this information, I'm sure that Les and Tyler and other people in Public Works will have better connections than I do and probably could do it better, come up with better ideas, but I wanted to be sure that I could back up the parameters of the motion with actual deliverables.
So Jim, you're thinking that 50,000 then will come out of what we originally set aside for the bridge?
Correct, we already have, 500 and something thousand budgeted for a bridge this year.
In capital projects.
So we clearly have the capital to do this, but if we do it, if it can be done for under 50,000 in some way, then we don't have to go through the bid process, and it speeds up the whole process, just
Gary,
like the.
You got a
Yeah,
question?
I guess I'm wondering if the council's direction is to suspend the multimodal concept at this point and put in a bicycle pedestrian bridge. I don't know that pricing it to avoid the bid process is going to get you the product you need. I mean, they can construct it, bring it in. There is other work that needs to be done. There's going to have to be some bulwarks or something that's going to have to hold the bridge. and then you're going to have to do some paving and that sort of thing. So,
Not necessarily. If it could be set in place, pavement to pavement, and bolted down,
yeah, I don't know.
not a lot has to be done.
All I'm trying to say is, are you limiting, if the desire is to have a economical bicycle pedestrian bridge, if it comes in over 50,000, then we'll have to step back, redo the process.
Right, but the bridge itself, it can be broken down into pieces that are less than 50,000. If the bridge itself is 50,000 or less, that can be done, and the other pieces are also less than 50,000 that need to be done to augment that.
You have to be very careful that you're not breaking the project into components in order to avoid the public bid process. But the point I'm trying to make is, if the action tonight is to suspend the multimodal bridge, we can have we have committee meeting next week. We can maybe have fleshed out some things and be able to present the practical aspects of that and bring that to committee, if that's your desire. I'm just afraid that you're going to limit yourself to the point where if something comes along that can't be done within that parameter, that we're going to have to go back and start over and we'll have lost time.
Well, I think the motion only said that the bridge would be under $50,000.
So if it's under 50, if it's over $50,000, it will be a no-go.
Well, or then it would have to revert
You
to
would
the
just
bidding
have to go to the
process, and
bid
it would just slow
process.
it down,
Yeah.
but.
Your Honor,
Yes.
just in case it'd be helpful, I've got a cost for the College Street Bridge that I think was installed in 2011. Sorry, my microphone's not on. I had the cost numbers for the pedestrian bridge that the city installed in 2011, along with the Intermodal Transit Center. And the bridge itself at that point for that individual location and span was $41,000, including fabrication and shipping. But there was another $24,000 in installation work, the abutment preparations, the concrete deck pour, the bridge crane work, field welding services, and others. So there are expenses for installation that were roughly about 50% or over 50% of the cost of the bridge itself. And so I just want to make you aware of that as you look at the budget number, just to keep that in mind.
Right. The difference between those structures and this one is those are permanent structures that required an abutment and would be permanently in place, whereas this would be something that would be there only until we can raise the funding to do the multimodal project, and then we can pick this bridge up and set it in aside, let's say at the cyclocross track, until we need to move it to the URA for the Hello Walk project.
And these weren't permanent abutments. This actually had a boxed, perched abutment system where you just had a steel box that was filled with concrete, and the bridge was then attached to that, bolted to that system. So it was kind of a non-permanent. It didn't have a full depth abutment installed.
Did you go through, did the city go through a bidding process to get that bridge?
The city actually did the installation ourselves with our crews, and the bridge itself was just procured from, I think it was the Missoula company over in Missoula.
Big R, I believe, right?
So that bridge actually itself was less than $50,000.
The bridge with shipping was $41,000. The bridge itself, which was a 10-foot wide deck, 70-foot span, was $36,000. The perched abutment, prefabricated abutment boxes were $3,500, and the shipping was another $1,500 from Montana. Again, these were back in 2011. And with steel prices and tariffs, I don't know what impact they would have, but those I just wanted to help
Well,
share.
clearly, the lowest cost option is the railroad flat car. I can get you a 56-foot railroad flat car for $19,000 that would span that and would require
What's the
no
width on
abutments.
that, Jim? Those,
It'd be 12 feet wide, and it would have a steel deck.
are all those 12 feet wide or just?
The railroad flat car. The Bailey Bridge is a 12-foot deck. The ET Tectonics one that's FRP would be a 10.5-foot deck.
And removal, do you have any idea about that? Like, we know that the putting in cost, but the pulling out?
You rent a crane, pick it up, put it on a truck. It cost about, crane rental's about $1,000 a day, I think. So.
I like that you've looked into it.
I like that.
But you're saying that, but November is when you think it'll be done, so it's going to sit through the winter, some traffic. But then it has to be removed by spring, depending on.
No, it doesn't have to be removed at all until the multimodal bridge is, until we acquire the funding to.
Bid.
It would, could remain in place for 10 years before we, I don't know.
Right.
We just don't know when we can get the funding to finish the multimodal project, which would be,
In the meantime.
which eventually is gonna have to happen, but
Well, the multimodal thing, that, there's always those possibilities of Tiger grants, which we put in for before too, and those are a very workable thing, and there's other grants now out in addition to that for infrastructure, and that includes bridges. And so that could be something that could be,
we can pursue that, and I would think we
absolutely,
would.
and we've been turned down on those before, and we could still get turned down, but someday, maybe we'll snag one of them, who knows? It's hard to say.
That's my fondest hope, is that we'll get the money for that from some outside funding source.
Yeah, so I think that given the fact we're investing heavily in the Third Street corridor with the two-lane bike lane and other facilities to encourage people to bike and walk that route, that I would hate to put all that in and have it end in nowhere, that you can't use it. So I'd be in favor of putting in the temporary thing, as long as its temporary nature is recognized, and then we continue to pursue funding or better bids for the multimodal bridge at the same time, but at least get something in place, and maybe even use that as a means to help educate, get people using that corridor, so that when the multimodal does come, people say, okay, this isn't so freaky as we thought it was going to be, and we can access it nicely. So I think it's got a lot of good ideas going for it, and I would be in favor of letting staff go to it and figure out whether it's feasible.
Brandy?
I think another benefit too, as far as completion of all this work that's being done in the corridor, coinciding with that, we could get some real good information, during that time where we've got it complete, the bike and pedestrian pathway across, looking at how is this whole construction of the protected bike lane, what impact is it having as far as bringing more ridership? And we can get some more valid measures, which we couldn't get if it just dead ends and doesn't connect all the way to Mountain View. So I would hate to stall that process in the hopes, that we get a grant or that the bid comes down, because we just don't know how long that's going to take.
Gary?
I think we need to go back and revisit where we've been. Council budgeted the multimodal bridge at $580,000. Since that time, roughly $100,000 of that has been used. The donations that were given for the bicycle pedestrian bridge were returned as instructed. There is a balance today, and there's still some engineering costs coming in, but the balance today is $487,809.50. So if some of those funds, if the council's intent is to use those funds or parts of them for a bicycle pedestrian bridge, that will reduce that amount obviously by at least whatever it costs. So there's a budget aspect we have to talk about here. There's certainly capacity for the council to redirect those funds. That's not the question. The question is, where do we go? And the draft budget that you had the workshop on a week ago today had all of that funding being spent in FY 2018, and there would be a carryover of approximately $87,130, which was what we expected to spend after October 1st to complete the project. Obviously, with the bids that came in, that's not possible. But I'm looking for some guidance from a budgetary standpoint, if it's the council's intent to proceed with the bicycle pedestrian temporary bridge at this point, then we'll need some direction on what you want us to do with the budget, which goes to public hearing on August 6th. So if the direction is use whatever it takes to get this bicycle pedestrian bridge in, we can certainly do that. But we'll have to amend the draft budget then, because we won't be spending probably any money next year. We'll estimate, because this project probably will bridge past October 1st. So we can figure that out. But there will be a balance of funds that was earmarked for the 3rd Street multimodal bridge, which is then, the origin of those funds was in general fund capital. So I'm assuming that those funds, what's remaining, would be transferred back or would be designated back to general fund capital. So I'm looking for a little guidance as well.
Jim,
Well,
you had a...
the part of my motion where I wanted the purchase to be done before this end of this fiscal year is so that it wouldn't affect the budget, the amount that was budgeted. And then I assumed that the remainder would be rolled over into the following year's budget in case we did get a favorable bid for the multimodal in the next year.
Okay.
So that could still remain, couldn't it? It could
if I-
still, those funds could still remain in that, for that purpose, and could continually be rolled over until such time as we acquired outside funding to complete the project, but without us changing the fiscal 19 budget, I would
Yeah.
think.
It's capital projects funds. It stays in the balance. So unless it's expended, that's where it stays.
It would still be earmarked for that
Yes.
project until we decided otherwise.
However, but I've been advising the council during my tenure here that if you're going, one of the things that Les advised was to rebid in the wintertime of this next year. If that is not the council's intent, then yes, we can probably leave the budget the way it is. However, if it is your intent to go out to bid again, you will only have whatever is left minus whatever this bicycle pedestrian bridge costs. If we know that the bridge itself, part of the bid is, say, approximately $750,000, then you'll only have approximately $400,000 to pay for it. You can't go out and get serious bids if you don't have the monies to pay for it. So that can be remedied. Council can open up the budget and do what it wants. We could transfer monies into that amount if you like. I'm just looking for, when we get to the point, do you intend on going out to bid again? In which case, we do have some budget work to do. Or if it is your intent not to, then what you want to do, Jim, if the council says that's what they want to do, the budget has capacity to do that.
Yeah, I think it's extremely unlikely we're going to get bids in the next year that are going to be anywhere close to what we have available, even without putting this other amenity in place. So,
And there would be costs associated with trying to get another bid as well, wouldn't there? I mean,
Yeah,
we'd have-
they're fairly minimal. The design work has been done. The bid documents have been prepared once already. We would have to change what the bid time or what the contract time would be and that sort of thing, but fairly minimal. Cost of publication, that sort of thing.
Well, I would like to see it to be able to go out to bid again, so, but I don't know when, because if we do something, and I think all the reasons that you're putting forth are good, to get people using the corridor, I think all that's excellent. But I see then us going out to bid again, not immediately, because we won't have the funds to go out immediately, so that means that less looking over everything and then trying to figure out our next moves or when to go to bid again. So it wouldn't be maybe this winter, but next winter. Is that what you're thinking?
That'd be the 2020 budget
Right.
you're talking about.
See
And
what
again,
happens
if I
with
may,
steel tariff.
as long as the balance in capital projects stays the same, that money is retained there. It's got a project identified with it. It's allocated. It will stay there until council directs us to put it somewhere else. So those funds, whatever remains, will remain in there.
So then that 87,000 that is current in the proposed budget, if this were to all occur quickly, it would be taken out because we wouldn't need it.
It'll still be
There.
allocated, but it will not be spent.
Okay.
The entire effect of this is less than $100,000. So if we go out to bid again and we get something that's close enough to what we had originally budgeted, we could probably find that money in capital projects to complete the project. So I don't see it, I see this $50,000, $60,000 with amenities that we might put into this as not something that really precludes us from finishing a project within a year if we somehow got a favorable bid. It's just something to make sure that something happens immediately to tie these improvements together and make this accessible to the public.
Gina?
I hear you, 100%. I do have to say, though, it sounds more like $75,000 to $90,000 of an expenditure, not necessarily 50 to 60, because we're going to buy the bridge and then we're going to have, or buy the whatever, and have to install it. And so it isn't just going to be 50. It's going to be $75,000 or $80,000, and that comes out of our pot of money, that puts us at under half of what we could potentially need. And that, I hear you, it's not in lieu of, but all of a sudden it becomes in lieu of. Because then we've got 2 or 3 or 4 years of cycle of trying to get money and finding ways to fund it
Yeah,
before we can do it. All of a sudden it becomes in lieu of.
I think.
If you pick the higher end things that I've
Yeah.
done here, if you take the lower end, if you can put a flat car there for $20,000 and put a railing on it, which I'll weld the railing on myself if I have to, like, it can be done for less. And I'm sure Les and Tyler and Public Works can come up with a way to do it for less, and that's my intent, is for them to find the least cost way to make those improvements accessible from Mountain View this year. That's my intent.
Brandy, you got another
Well,
point?
yeah, I mean, I think the reason that we're all kind of in agreement to reject these bids is that we're not prepared to spend twice as much as
Well, the bids
that,
are
right?
gone.
So-
That's a done deal.
Exactly,
Yeah,
so if we even think, then, I mean, our intent isn't to then gradually build up to this amount that we don't have right now. I mean, I think we're all agreeing that that's not an amount that makes sense at this point, so.
But we had budgeted 580 to start
Right.
with. So that's what we agreed on being a reasonable number.
Right, but I'm
We don't
saying-
even have that much anymore if we do this.
Well, I know, but I think that,
We don't have it
is the
now,
bed
Sheena.
ever gonna come at that? You know, I think that's
I
what
don't know.
you're,
Don't know.
Well,
We don't have that now. You're right.
Ann, I haven't heard from you down there. What you thinking?
I appreciate Jim doing the work, and I feel ready to vote.
You ready to vote?
well, okay, we got it, and we're gonna have to re-talk this motion. I know there's $50,000 involved.
I
Would
can
you
read
go-
it again if you want.
Okay, read it again. Jim, would you please? You were the motion maker and Brandy was the second.
Okay, what I moved is that the council direct staff to find and install a temporary portable bike pedestrian bridge for Third Street to connect the Third Street improvements to Mountain View Road with the following parameters. Number one, the purchase of the structure be complete by the end of this fiscal year, 2018. The cost of the structure be under $50,000 in order to avoid the bidding process. And number three, that the bridge be open to the public by the end of the calendar year.
And that was seconded by Brandy. Okay, everybody understand the motion?
Not entirely. $50,000 gets us what? A bridge and installation, or a bridge only? Or are we just sending you out to figure that out?
I'd like to see the whole thing done for $50,000, and I think it can be done.
Okay.
I mean, if we want to add some amenities to that afterwards, if that's what Public Works says, look, if you do this, it serves you better in a lot of other ways when we move it to another location or whatever, then great. But there are less expensive than $50,000 ways to get it done, and there's certainly ways we can split up the costs of purchasing this thing to get it under that to start with, so.
Is it possible to get it done by the end of the year?
I have two contractors, that say they can have it by November. One is October, the other's November, and the railroad flat cars can be here in 2 weeks.
It'll be interesting to see if that pulls through, because all these guys are so damn busy. Gary, do you have another point?
Yeah, my only comment is, the motion is to direct staff to do it. We will begin to look at it and determine if it is possible with the research that you've done, Jim. And we can report back to committee and council as we move through the process. If it turns out, I don't profess to be an engineer, but I know even on the Railroad Street bicycle pedestrian bridge, there was engineering that needed to be done for that. That may already be done in this case. I know that we looked at that prior to the multimodal concept. So we'd have to go back, check that out. But we can do that, I assume, fairly quickly, Les, to determine what is necessary.
Yeah, there are a number of components that have to go into a structure, even as you're suggesting. We do have geotechnical work, but it would have to be reassessed with respect to this structure as compared to what we currently are discussing in the rejection of bids tonight. We would also probably have to go back through the permitting process with the Corps of Engineers because it's a different structure than what we applied for previously. So those have to factor into the schedule overall. The design of the bridge itself, the engineering of the bridge, typically is done by the manufacturer of prefabricated structures. So those that are in Montana or the others you cited could provide that engineering design for the superstructure, the bridge itself. The substructure, which is the foundation, even if it's a portable, it's not really portable, but a temporary concrete encasement system, has to be designed. So that would occur as well. The timing is an interesting challenge for us. Construction in November on a creek bank would be an interesting one. So that's part of what we'd have to look at, how quickly we could pull something together along that line.
Yes, even if it is temporary, it has to meet standards. And it has to meet safety standards, engineering standards. Les indicated, we have to certify to the Corps that whatever is put in that floodway has to be able to move water. So that's the
hydraulic
permitting
assessment
process.
as well.
Exactly. So
It would be above the creek grade.
certainly, again, we're regulated by the Corps. It isn't, so we can go through that and see what we can get done. Your construction schedule, in all likelihood, is likely not achievable. I would say if you move it to next spring, as soon as we can get out there, we can probably get that done. I think we'd have a lot better shot at it.
Certainly.
But we can assess it and then bring a report back.
Well, and Jim is.
Don't want to throw
he's got-
cold water
he's
on it. We
got
just want to
two-
make sure we can.
Well,
The
Gary,
two-
Jim says he's got two contractors that say they can do
Sure.
it. So they need to be, if this is
They-
true.
All the drawings would have engineering,
Sure.
PE stamps on them.
That would be for the fabrication of
Yeah.
the structure itself that would be shipped here.
Right. And it
But
would be-
beyond that would be all the rest of
Right,
these items
but if
as
it's a
well.
temporary structure that can be set pavement to pavement in the middle of the street there, it shouldn't require much in terms of groundwork.
Well, and like I said, give us a chance to assess it. If the council wants to
I'm not
vote on
an
the motion,
engineer,
we'll do what
but
we can.
I've seen numerous pictures of these things put
Sure.
in place with a crane in the same day and in use. So it can be done.
Well, okay, well, we got a motion, we got a second. Does everybody understand what we're voting on?
Almost.
I
What
guess
we're attempting to do, at least. Yeah.
the more that we're talking about it, my qualm is just with the caveats on that. The three specific, I agree that it sounds like it might be hard to achieve those things.
It may be, and we may not be able to. We may have to come back with another motion to amend one of those or change it at some point if it's not achievable.
So if city staff says the timeline isn't realistic, then we can say, okay, do we want to extend the timeline, or do we want to say 60,000 at 50,000,
Yeah, I think,
right?
if I may,
there's options.
I think we're getting the message that you want this done as quickly as possible and you want it to be built for a certain amount of money. We will look into that and come back and let you know the challenges. And if it can be done, staff will get it done. If it is something that is impossible or we just can't get it done in that time frame or that cost, we'll come back and tell you that as well.
What I'm basically trying to get across here is that I want a certain sense of urgency in this, getting this finished in time to mesh with the Third Street improvements, and that there's not a big lag time fiddling around trying to get it going. So that's why I put those parameters on there.
Okay,
Is there also the understanding that we are still pursuing other sources of funding and/or bids on the permanent bridge at the same time?
Maybe that should be a separate motion.
That's what I was talking about.
Make
that-
a
that
separate
was still-
motion to continue with the pursuit of bids within our budget. Terry,
Would it be better as a separate motion or as amendment to yours?
I think it complicates that
Yeah, I
motion
think
too
it should be
much.
separate, just like the same way we separated out rejecting.
okay, let's do this.
Okay, I'll open
Time
my mouth
urgency
later.
on that one either.
Let's do this. You got a motion, you got a second, everybody knows what it is. Let's vote on that, then Ari, you can bring this up next, okay? And we'll start to roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Okay, now, Art, you
Now
got
I
the
would like
floor.
to make a motion that simultaneous with the temporary bridge, that we continue to pursue grant funding or rebidding of a permanent multimodal bridge at the
Second.
same time.
What does that mean? That we pursue grant money for bidding, you said?
No, grant money
Yeah, I know.
or rebids
Right.
on
Two different things,
the
Randy.
proposed permanent bridge, so both not letting the multimodal slide off the edge of the table, but pursuing
And so
that yet.
with the rebids, it sounds like the timing would be important because of the budget issues. Is that,
The budget issues are not, excuse me, insurmountable. We can open the budget and the council can direct staff to find some revenue sources to meet the financial need. We could do that in the same process that we do in the regular budget process. In fact, we'll be opening the budget August 20th to take care of all the grants and things we've gotten this year. So it's not an impossible task. We can certainly do that. I guess from our perspective,
I don't think it'll be successful in the least.
okay, if you could rephrase,
You want to say in the next fiscal year?
Yeah.
You want to add that in there?
Well, it's going to have to be in the next fiscal year.
Yeah, but I mean, not 2 years from now, but
Yeah, and an ongoing process, you know.
excuse, could I
Well,
get a
20
clarification? What do you mean it would have to be within the next fiscal year?
Well, if we do it in January, it's 2019 budget.
Yes.
That's what you're
After
talking
That's
about.
your
Yeah,
intent.
after the 1st of November, it's the 2019 budget.
First of October.
Yeah.
But, okay, I just want clarification that you're intending that we go out again in the FY 2019 budget year.
Yep. I think I agree with Jim that we might not see much happen for another 18 months, but given Les's point that bidding is better in the spring, I'd like to give it a go. And then even if it does go through, we have a temporary bridge that can be used to bridge Paradise Creek over at the other end of Hello Walk. So it's not like we're throwing money into the landfill.
Everybody good? I'm gonna start the roll with you, Brandy.
no.
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we got 5 ayes and 1 no, so staff has got their direction. With that, we'll move on, but I'm gonna take a 10-minute recess. It is 8:48, everybody be back here by 8:40, or 59. We are reconvening our meeting at 8:58, and we'll go with item number 10, which is Paradise Creek Floodplain Study Application Fee Approval. Bill Belknap. Hello, Bill.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Honor. So just a little bit of background. And the council's seen this before, but for those maybe who haven't in the viewing audience or on TV, I thought it'd be helpful to cover this. Back several months ago, a developer was exploring the purchase of 3 properties currently addressed as 213, 225 Spotswood, and 222 Troy Road. Through the course of completing their due diligence on the property, they did identify that it was within the mapped 100-year floodplain. And as a result, both combination of the floodplain elevations and the elevation of the property, any new development on that site was going to be required to be elevated 2 to 4 feet above the current grade on the property. So those properties are these 3 that form this triangle here, with Spotswood on the north side of the property, Jefferson on the east side, and then the Troy Highway located on the south. Currently housed an older car wash and a couple other structures on the property, but that was the property that was subject of redevelopment at that time. So this is the copy of the floodplain map with that property highlighted in red. So you can see the dark shaded area is the 100-year floodplain. That is the regulatory floodplain, where any structures have to be elevated or protected from flood hazard damage, and then lighter shaded area is the 500-year floodplain. So you can see a fairly large widening of the floodplain right above this note here, which comments that that's the location of the concrete plant bridge. And that bridge was a large flow obstruction that caused the widening of the floodplain upstream of that bridge location. So that boundary was impacted by that bridge, which had been removed in the late 90s. There are 29 parcels that were impacted by that enlarged floodplain boundary. 14 of those were located in the Legacy Crossing Urban Renewal District, and those 3 parcels that we're looking at redevelopment were located in the district. And ultimately, the goal here was lowering and reducing the regulatory floodplain would then facilitate and assist in the redevelopment of the properties and ADA access into the buildings and overall site development. So this is kind of an old picture of the area when Main Street was 95, now running north through town. This is Sweet Avenue, just to kind of orient yourself. And so there were a number of railroad crossings, and then the concrete plant bridge was this thing right here. So Paradise Creek comes through the site, swings kind of like it does today, and continues on to the west. So there were 2 railroad crossings, the old 95 bridge, and then this was really the problematic bridge, the concrete plant bridge there. When the south couplet was constructed, old 95 bridge still exists, but that concrete plant bridge was right about where the new bridge is. So that was removed back in 97, 98 to make way for the south couplet construction. There were 29 parcels, as I mentioned, impacted. Those are all the ones shaded there in green, and then Legacy Crossing boundaries, this purple line in the background that jogs around. But those are all the properties that were impacted by that current floodplain boundary. We kind of stepped through this in 3 different phases on the study. The first was just kind of an office analysis that Alta Engineering and Science did for us. We then moved into phase 2 that included a field survey and hydraulic analysis and all the technical work necessary to support a letter of map amendment. That work was authorized with a scope to not exceed $16,000, and on January 18th and February 5th, the City Council agreed half of that phase 2 work in $8,000, and the agency funded the remaining $8,000 for the work. So that field survey was completed, and it indicated there were large reductions in the floodplain. 23 of the 29 impacted parcels were removed from the 100-year floodplain. And this is kind of an exhibit. The colors don't work very well. I guess I'll zoom in on this one. It's a little bit better, but the green line shows the current 100-year floodplain boundary, and the light and blue line shows the proposed 100-year floodplain boundary after the survey, the bridge removal, and the remodeling work that was done by Alta. So all the properties here on the north side of the Troy Highway were removed as a result of that assessment. So after that completion of phase 2, we moved into phase 3, which was all the preparation work necessary for the letter of map amendment application with FEMA. Alta had provided us a proposal of $2,700 to prepare the application, and there was an additional $1,300 of surplus budget we had allocated to respond to any additional information requests we may receive from FEMA. So that was a total project budget of $4,000, and again, that was split 50-50 between the city and the agency for that work. At that point in time, we were estimating that the FEMA review time would be 90 days, and we reported, most importantly, that there would be no application fee because the amendment was based on additional, more accurate data. And there are a number of different classifications these letter map amendments can be receipted under. In this case, the bridge was removed in 97, 98, and the floodplain map was then published in 2002. And so in our discussions with FEMA, we indicated that it was an error in their work, that they didn't recognize that the bridge was removed when they did the new study for the 2002 map. And they indicated that if it was based on more accurate information, there would be no application fee for the letter of map amendment. And that's what we reported to council at that time. And both the agency and the council authorized moving forward with phase 3 of the project at that time. And so as I mentioned, the council did approve funding half of that phase 3 work in a total amount of $2,000 that came from the legislative non-prioritized projects budget amount. So since that time, as I mentioned, April 15th, council authorized that additional funding for the application. The application was submitted on April 27th, so just about 2 weeks after the council's authorization of that funding. And on June 15th, staff received a request for additional information from FEMA, so there's some map clarifications that they would like to see. But they also reported that the hydraulic analysis and survey, or the survey of the channel, and the hydraulic analysis that supported the 2002 map was actually completed in 1997, so 5 years before the map was published. Therefore, the bridge was removed after the time that they did the survey work, and so they classified the LOMA request as being related to a bridge and structure removal, not based on more accurate information, because the information the map was based on what they measured in 1997. And as a result, the city would need to pay the $8,000 letter of map amendment application fee. After discussions with the city supervisor, Gary recommended that the additional $8,000 could be funded from the non-prioritized projects from the legislative account. There was $15,000 remaining after all the other council authorized commitments, so that was presented to the administrative committee on July 9th, 2018, and the committee authorized the expenditure of the funds with a recommendation to bring it back to the council for ratification at tonight's meeting, which is what we are here to do. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from Bill?
No question.
I have one question.
Brandy?
Is there a reason why we're not asking the URA for half of that, since it's been kind of half all along the other stages?
In internal discussions, it was really determined that the city is the agency responsible for administration of the National Flood Insurance Program within the city, and felt that we should pay the application fee without the agency's assistance. The agency is certainly authorized under state statute to undertake studies and analysis and reports, but I think the city felt, in conversation with Gary, he felt it was appropriate for the city to pay for the application fee.
If I may, since Bill has a dual role here as the executive director of the URA, we discussed it, and clearly it's a city responsibility. We appreciate the URA's assistance in doing some of these things, but really it is a city responsibility. The URA had nothing going on in that area when those bridges were removed or that initial map was done. So it just appears to be the right thing to do.
Great, thank you.
Bill, I would move to ratify the authorization of $8,000 from the legislative prioritized projects line item to fund the LOMR application fee.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion by Art and a second by Ann to ratify the authorization of $8,000 from the legislative non-prioritized line to fund the LOMR application fee. I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay, we will move on to item number 11, which is Small Office Commercial Sanitary Sewer Rate Pilot Program. Gary, you've got the floor, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is another ratification, and with the situation that the council canceled the July 2nd fee, and staff really appreciates that, but you then get these meetings that are a little heavy on the agenda when we come back. We brought to committee at that time a proposal to create a new class of sewer rate. And as I informed the committee at that time, met with representatives of water, sewer, public works director, and our utility billing folks downstairs. we're in a situation where commercial accounts, sewer accounts, are billed $66.50 per month in this particular class, and then $3.14 per 100 cubic feet of water usage on top of that. So you get your base rate, and then you get a rate based on volume. And that's intended to be that if you are, say, a restaurant and you're using a lot of water, you're in a different class because you have fat, oil, and grease issues. But if you're a business that would be in the same class as a small office, and say in your busy season you're using your facilities more and the water usage reflects that, which means that you're putting more load into the sewer system. So that is why there is a volume component to the sewer rate. That is an issue with some businesses that are more akin to a residence, where a residence has a sewer rate and a water rate. They pay for volume on their water. They get, based upon their water usage, they get a water bill. But no matter what their water usage is, if you're a residence, you don't pay more in your sewer bill. Now it's the same case if you have one person in a huge residence or you have a lot of people in that residence, you pay the same sewer rate. So it's average, if you will, across that entire class, residential class of customers. You have some offices that have, say they have a toilet facility, a bathroom facility, and then a sink, coffee maker, that sort of thing. And their usage will stay the same almost all year round. It isn't going to change a lot either way. Either they will use just barely into the volume because you pay your base rate and then $3.14 per 100 cubic feet. Some businesses never reach the 100 cubic feet. Some go way over that during irrigation season, and that's really the change. We have some businesses that don't change the amount of water they use, except that they have a lawn that they like to keep green or grounds that they want to irrigate. The water that they use for irrigation does not impact the sewer system. So these folks were seeing a big increase in the summertime in their water rate. They're going to see that because they're using water just like everybody else. But they were seeing an increase in their sewer rate based on the volume of water they were putting on their lawns. So it had no rational relationship to the sewer rate. So staff did a great job, Mike Parker and the crew, Meredith Whiteman out at the water department, Cassie Macy downstairs at utility billing, spent a lot of time going through and looking at all the potential businesses that could fall into this category. And Les, I can't recall, but I think there were 49 of them, if my memory serves. So there are not very many of them. And typically, great example is Lucas and Company over on Jefferson and Fifth. He keeps a nice green lawn because he believes that's what he wants for his business. But his use of the facilities within the business don't really change very much. So every year he was coming in with a pretty large sewer bill that wasn't really related to the use of the sewer. So these folks spent a good amount of time going through calculating this sort of thing, and we've come up with a hybrid rate which we believe is fair to that class. So we've identified the members of the class. The new classification would be you pay the commercial sewer base fee as you do today, but instead of paying a volume-based rate, we have built 200 cubic feet of rate of volume into this class. So it'll be $3.14 times 2, $6.28 plus the base sewer rate. And for that class, they won't see any sort of change during irrigation season, which seems to be the right thing to do. Now, one of the things that we talked about as well, we will continue to monitor that over this billing cycle, this irrigation season, and that's the reason we're asking for ratification, because it's been implemented because we were already in the irrigation season. You'll see this new classification in the FY 2019 fee resolution. In the meantime, these folks will continue to monitor it, make sure that it's getting done what needs to be done. But it seems like, and I'm very appreciative of staff, taking a good hard look at this and coming up with a solution that seems to serve the customer. So that's what we're asking for today, that you ratify that new classification. Again, you'll see it again in the FY19 fee resolution.
Gary, I got a question for you. You were talking about 49 businesses have been identified. What if, what kind of a process will we have if there's somebody else out there that comes in and says, oh, by the way, I think I fall in this classification. Who do they see? How can they go forward with?
Well, usually,
I think I'm one of those businesses to determine whether you are
usually
or
the
not.
utility billing folks will hear it first.
Talking about Corey and
Corey and
Kate-
Cassie.
Cassie.
Cassie's the main utility billing clerk. What she will do then is she'll contact Mike Parker or Meredith or Les, somebody to say, okay, this person has an inquiry, could you look into it? And it may have been a business that was looked at initially, maybe it's changed, maybe there's a reason that it doesn't fit in that class. So that's how that would start.
Well, just in case we miss somebody.
Absolutely.
Art?
Yeah, it's kind of an extension of that. Is there a mechanism to determine which class a new incoming business should fall into? And further, should a building change its use later on, is there a way to?
We go through, utility billing and the water and sewer departments go through those analyses virtually all the time. You'll get an office that converts to a restaurant, so they'll go into a different class, or maybe they will split it and they'll have two offices in there, so they're in a different class, so on and so forth. So Public Works and utilities will review that whenever it comes in.
I appreciate immensely, and I said this at the administrative committee when you presented this first time, this is a innovative and flexible and responsive approach to solving this problem, and I think it is laudable, very much so. So I would move that we ratify implementation of the pilot program for the new rate classification for small office commercial sanitary sewer rate as outlined.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion by Gina and a second by Art to ratify the implementation of the pilot program for the new rate classification for small office commercial sanitary sewer rate as outlined. We'll start to roll with that.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Okay, with that, we are going to move on to reports, and I'm going to start with you, Gina.
The 1 week that I had all of my meetings occurred last week, and I was at a conference in Boise, becoming a more thoroughly educated community and economic developer, so I have nothing to report.
I asked Jim Bolin, who is the bicyclist of the year here in the state of Idaho, to give us a little summary of his trek. So I asked him to, because this is really interesting, Jim, just kind of summarize your events.
Okay, well, that's an awfully big project at this time of night to be talking about, but it's a long ways from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean on a bicycle, I can tell you that, and there's a lot of wide open space there. If you go on a trek like that, you'll find yourself with a renewed sense of appreciation for humanity. The kindness of people along the way was absolutely great. Also, you'll also find that out on the open road, anything that's good for the safety of someone on a bicycle is accidental. If there's a shoulder on the road without a rumble strip in it or anything like that, there's a lot of miles from Oregon to Kansas that have space for a cyclist so you can be out of the lane of traffic, but from the other side of Kansas to the Atlantic Ocean, there's a lot of it where you're in the way and you're not really welcome and you're not really safe. So I suggest if you're going to do it, plan your route carefully. But yeah, it was a fabulous experience, and glad I did it, and thanks for your interest.
I told Jim he should write a book about this, because one of the things he told me is there's at least 2,000 miles of it. It's very dangerous on a bicycle. I thought, oh my God, can you imagine that? I don't want to be on a stretch 2 miles, let alone 2,000.
I used to think crossing the Clearwater Bridge was dangerous, but there's probably 2,000 miles of that on the Transamerica, so be advised that you'll be in the way, unwelcome and unsafe part of the good part of the way. The only other report I have is that I went to the 1912 facilities thing about the replacement of the roof, and that's moving along quite nicely, and it's almost done except for the skylights. So because of things they found when they tore off the old roof, there's been $53,000 of change orders in that project that Heart of the Arts is picking up. The skylights have to be custom made, so they won't be ready until the end of August. So that project will be entirely complete probably by the second week of September.
Nice.
That's all I have.
Okay, Brandy.
Sustainable Environment Commission, gosh, this was quite a while ago, but it was since our last council meeting. Dwight did a great, presentation on the pesticides issue for Otness Park, and there was a wonderful discussion and even some ideas about maybe inviting some interested staff and Parks Commission to join it. They're thinking about making a subcommittee to really try to work on how can they try to make that project a success. So I think that's kind of in the works. Kelly, as always, gave a great sustainability report for the city. Talked about some Wisescape expansion happening outside of City Hall. That's about it for SEC then. There's Pathways. David Schott. We have Parks and Rec have been busy in my commissions. Gave a recap of the whole spin issue that we also had that presentation, and there was a lot of discussion about scooters and e-bikes, which we know is not the pressing thing that's going to be coming with spin right now. Further finalizing the bike tour, which will be on September 11th. And then I'll let the mayor talk about the great quarterly breakfast that the city hosted, and with the Poverty and the Blues great speakers. I learned a lot from different perspectives, the university and United Way down in Lewiston. It was very informative. A lot of people attended. And AIC, of course, and we all broke off and had some interesting, I went to a very thrilling budget 101 meeting, but a really cool one on LOCA vesting too, and how that's happening in certain places, and so that was fun. Boise was great to wander around. So.
Thank you, Randy. Catherine.
Okay. I got to go to the Art Commission meeting, and just a reminder that this Wednesday is the Art Affair from 5 to 9 at the Fairfield Inn Suites. And the Art Commission is in the middle of strategic planning, and they are starting to get very deep into the areas of policy and staff roles and expectations. So they've moved past mission and vision, and so it's getting a lot deeper. They need 2 people, so hopefully we'll get some appointments coming through. So on the hunt for 2 seats.
Which group is that?
This is Arts Commission. And then Susan Hodgen came. She's Moscow's Poet Laureate for the next 3 years, and she read some poems, and they talked about how they're trying to get more poetry in the community and in the schools, and I'm sure she's going to come and read here and all that kind of stuff. Mayor's Arts Awards are in October 25th. The health district's going to have banners on their light poles, and so those came through the commission, and they show that says Gritman and has a picture of the Gritmans, and 1897 I think was when they started, and so they're going to put that all up on their light poles, and so they're kind of try to identify, so that was interesting. And then there's a closing reception for this exhibit that's out that we have now on August 3rd, and it's being catered by Kitchen Counter. Then Farmers Market met. That commission's full. And right now the big deal is the oral history of the Farmers Market. They're trying to celebrate 50 years of the Farmers Market, and they're capturing it with the StoryCorps model. And so Jamie Hill's in charge of that, and so they're working on that. And then also Steve Peterson, the economic guy, and Colette Phillips, isn't that his name? That's not his name.
The economic guy?
Yeah, and they're doing the rapid market assessment. So on July 28th, if you see people counting, they're trying to get some more metrics on the market, and they're also going to be doing a survey. So they're going to actually go to door to door to store people and get like how they're being impacted by the market. And officially, Amanda Argona has taken over as the community events director and in charge of the market. So she's doing that, and they'll be doing some farm visits coming up here soon. So if you are interested, you can always go on the farm visits. And then I emailed all of you the information on fracking that came from Eagle. So Shelley Brock and her association that she's been part of, they're hoping to make that ordinance work for the whole state in terms of keeping resources protected. So there'll be more, you can read about their highlights and stuff, but they're in the codification process in Eagle for that. And I inserted a link so that you could see from Idaho geology, because there's interactive maps on Idaho geology, and you can see that we do have natural gas. I mean, the exploration wasn't here that long ago. I mean, it was in '88. I know I'm going on long, but there are people looking, so it's just to be aware. So that's all. That's what there was. And I loved AIC. That was terrific. And the poverty on the Palouse thing was very good. And it's just been busy times. Yeah.
Art? Three things. Palouse Knowledge Corridor met up without quorum, but they discussed a few things, modifying some of their activities to incorporate high school innovators and innovations in the fall to try to pull in high school students early on into the entrepreneurship realm, and also perhaps changing the Be the Entrepreneur boot camp into a touch-up for previous campers there as sort of a graduate school for those who've already been through it once but could use a touch-up. The URA met a couple weeks back on the budget, potential sale of some Alturas lots and what to do with the money devolving from those sales, which would then be returned directly to the taxing entities as opposed to going back into the URA. Also, there will be some work going on at the corner of 6th and Jackson at the Turnstone Flats building along their two sidewalks to improve ADA access at the southeast corner of that, because right now that's definitely substandard. There's no landing pad for people in a wheelchair and things like that. So they'll be reworking both fronts of the sidewalk on that building in conjunction with the URA. Parks and Rec Commission met. They are looking for revitalization of Blackbird Station funding, if we can raise any more money from the citizens. An Eagle Scout from Troop 344 is looking to put up interpretive signs for birds at the Anderson Frontier Park, which is a haven for birds, and it's kind of an identification and natural history sign that he'll be putting up. Looking to decrease the use of pesticides, especially the neonicotinoids where possible on all kinds of parkland. And then in an open discussion, it was discussed that one of the trees has been felled in the East City Park recently, but they left the stump up about 4 feet and are looking to potentially partner with the Arts Commission to get somebody out there with a chainsaw and turn it into a Moscow bear type of thing to see if that is a possibility. And so much discussion went on about potentials for vandalism or children toppling off the thing and things like that. But, it's kind of, oh, come on. Why not give it a whirl, see what happens?
We used to have a guy here in town, didn't we, Jim, that could do that with a chainsaw, Greg Pohl, back in the day.
You know what, Art, if you want to pass along, I don't know if there would be interested in other days, but the house kitty corner from us on Polk and A, they had a stump and they left it, I don't know, maybe about 3 feet high, and they carved, it's like a chair. It's so cool. And then on the back, someone used a wood burner, and there's a cool design on the back of it, but that could be the bear. But it's cool. I mean, you see kids walking on the sidewalk and they get up and they sit in it. It has armrests that are from the stump. It was just carved out like this, and it's all smooth. It's really cool.
So anyway, so the Parks and Rec is thinking about that. When they saw down the tree, they deliberately left the thing about 4 feet up with this idea in mind. So kudos to Parks and Rec for that one.
Ann?
Still processing that. P&Z met twice since the last time we met. So the first time was June 27th. They had 2 public hearings. One of them came to us tonight with the Duma property, and the other one is 2324 South Highway 95, and they're looking at rezoning that, or they recommended that we rezone from ag forest to motor business. One more public hearing on July 11th. And again, recommended that it comes to us, Peterson Second Edition. I don't know where that is. And then, sorry, thought I'd written down the address. They also looked at the proposed Legacy Crossing District Plan Amendment, and there was a lot of discussion about how the URA functions. So they approved it, but I think we'll have an ongoing discussion. It looks like they might want to have Bill come visit and talk just about that entity in general.
Is this the extension of the URA to the east side of Main Street?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and then there are several items moving forward with the public hearing. There is the insertion of missing PUD-based entities, allowing properties in rural zoning districts to have different lot frontage and access requirements, amending the expiration and extension periods for certain land use actions, and amending the time period for public notice requirements. Fair and affordable housing has not met since we last met, and SMART, the exciting thing there is that a lot of the committees that haven't met for quite some time are going to start. So marketing, strategic planning, I think we're really starting to, see some of that stuff come together. And that's it for me.
Nice. I have a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not going to go over a bunch of it too, so, because we got other things to carry on this evening. But I'm going to talk about AIC that we had from June 20th to the 22nd. Brandy, Art, and Catherine and I were there, as well as a bunch of staff. Me and Lori was there, and a bunch of us. And had really good different seminars throughout the entire thing. And one thing I'll tell you is it's always kind of fun going as a city of Moscow, because there's, we sit up here, me as the mayor and all of you as councilors, and, we're on the firing line a lot of times for about the different things we do. And we do a lot of things right in the city of Moscow that we can be proud of, every one of us. So when you're up here sometime and we, whatever it is that we're listening to, and we deal with it and we move on. And I'm proud of the group and the stuff we're getting achieved. And it's amazing, because we were at that awards meeting that one night, all of us that were there. And that's exciting when the city of Moscow gets different recognitions for different things from our staff or whatever. That's a big deal for us. I want to talk about 2 weeks ago, there was a 8-team tournament here for the U12 Cal Ripken baseball tournament. I was there for 3 days, had just an absolute blast. I talked to some of us about that before, and the reason I'm bringing that up now is that this weekend there is a U12 regional baseball tournament here, and we're hosting in Moscow 16 teams, and that's from Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Western Canada. It's a big deal here for us, and that's a big deal. And I get to throw the opening pitch out on Wednesday night. I hope I don't bean anybody. I'll have to
Over
find
the
a kid.
backstop, Bill.
Well, there you have. But anyway, the neat thing about that is that gives a lot of credence to our town. And of course, we got Rendezvous in the Park coming up this Thursday night as well. I'm going to be there too. But it's going to be a lot of fun stuff going on. It's going to be very, very busy. Hospitality end of it for our town, for our restaurants and different things. It's going to be amazing. And that's the kind of stuff that we need. Got our new ball fields. And of course, they're using not only the new ball fields, but they're using 2 fields at Gormley as well. So that's a big deal. And I want to talk a little bit about the July 11th regional breakfast that we had here that City of Moscow hosted. And I was really proud of the 5 speakers that we had. Man, we could have spent a day with those 5 people. They're all very, very energetic about what they're doing. Poverty on the Palouse is a big deal for them. We try to keep it with food security. Well, we kind of hit a broad base, and man, it was fun. We tried to zoom through it as quickly as possible, and we kept everybody. I commandeered, I wouldn't let anybody out the door, so it was great. And there was some great presentations, but that was a fun, lively breakfast that we had that day, and it had some real meat to it, so I thought. Gary, do you have anything?
The only thing I was going to talk about is, thank you all. We did have our FY 2019 budget workshop. Got it done in one day, different format, very enjoyable. So we're ready to go. Based on the conversation tonight, we will make no changes to the budget, and we will be presenting it for public hearing. It'll be on the website by the end of the week. So not only a summary, but the detail as well.
Okay, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I would take a motion to adjourn to executive session per Idaho Code 74206 1B, 1C, and 1F. And this meeting will not reconvene once that's over.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will adjourn to executive session. Thank you, everybody, at 9:32.
Bye, Victoria.
Good night.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.